seven different platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Most people are probably watching on Twitter. And for those of you watching, just the other day, I released some breaking news that got a lot of people excited. It was Congressman Dan Bishop, who is our special guest today on the Educational Freedom Institute podcast, introduced legislation that would fund students directly using all additional federal education dollars coming through the CARES Act and otherwise through federal stimulus. And it would follow students to wherever they're getting their education if their schools don't reopen in person. So I just want to say thank you so much, Congressman Dan Bishop from North Carolina, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you so much for your tweet yesterday getting the word out. And it seemed to receive an enthusiastic reception.
Yeah, so Congressman Bishop, could you just give us a little bit kind of the rundown of why, kind of what was your motivation for bringing this legislation into play, and what's the specifics and the selling points behind it?
Well, Corey, in so many ways, the COVID pandemic has changed life in America, but none more significant than the experience of students now to having across pretty much every state, I think, has, and of course, I've focused on North Carolina, but where you have in-person learning either exclusively or some sort of rotating schedule. Some of our counties in North Carolina are doing that, where you go in for a couple of days a week and the rest of the time it's online. And I don't think that makes any sense, frankly, in the context of the pandemic and what we know about the virus. But whether it makes sense or not, the evidence is pretty clear that you're seeing tremendous learning disadvantages by this being subjected to online learning. There was a good article in the Wall Street Journal earlier this year that indicated 30% loss in reading, 50% loss in math in terms of comprehension and progress. And so, there are many families who are well off in the country who can figure out a way to adapt to that, and they are, Corey. But there are also many, many families who are condemned to that. I mean, they have only their public school, whatever the public school allows them. So if the public school may not be teaching in person at all, or certainly not on a regular schedule. So what the Choice Act would do, that I have now introduced, is it would direct the Department of Education to make direct grants to families whose schools are not providing in-person instruction to pay the cost of alternative education options. So the Department of Education would develop an application form. It could be online or manual, and it would require including a certification that the school system, the regular school available to that child, is not teaching in person on a regular schedule, and it would require documenting personal income. You're back.
Hey, Congressman Bishop.
So, I was starting to explain, but I don't know whether I continued on the stream and you dropped off, so I just paused.
Yeah, so just for the listeners, I'm here in DC and it is pouring, and I've been having some technical issues. So sorry about that. But yeah, let's jump back into it because I can hear you now, and hopefully you can hear me. So what is the main kind of just to clarify, is it 10% of the additional CARES Act funding that would be attached to students?
That's correct. So it would set aside any further appropriation for the Education Stabilization Fund that was set up in the CARES Act, and that would go toward these grants that the Department of Education would make directly with families. And so, for example, the HEALS Act that is out there proposes to provide $70 billion to the Education Stabilization Fund. So $7 billion of that then, before approved, would go to these grants for alternative education options.
And included in the bill, correct me if I'm wrong, this is not just homeschooling, right, or not just private schooling. It could be used for pandemic pods too and micro schools.
You're absolutely right. So it could be used for private school tuition from a private school licensed by the state. It could go for private tutoring, including, as you said, micro schools or learning pods. It could go for homeschooling expenses. It could go for textbooks and other educational materials. It could go for electronic devices to facilitate education for students. And the secretary would also have discretion to identify other purposes consistent with the bill that could be funded from the funds available.
Yeah, and something else that I thought was interesting about your particular bill, Congressman Bishop, is that it has a particular part in it, and I saw this on your press release as well, that it wouldn't allow for additional federal regulations creeping its way into the household and into religious institutions, which I thought was a plus, because a lot of homeschool families are rightfully worried about federal intervention in the household. So could you comment a little bit more about that specific decision?
Absolutely, Corey, and you're exactly right. I mean, there are, I think educational choice generally, and certainly in this particular moment, is, as I agree with those who said, it's the civil rights issue of the 21st century. The federal government can play a role in seeing to it that the need is funded, but that doesn't mean that the federal government needs to get its tentacles down into managing, manipulating people's lives. So the bill specifically forbids any government control over any aspect of the education provided by private school or religious school or home education provider. So we've covered that with great deliberateness.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that was interesting about your particular bill in Congress, that the other bills that I've seen in Congress don't kind of have attached to it, is that your bill in particular makes the funding contingent upon whether your traditional public school district doesn't reopen in person, which is essentially most school districts in the U.S. right now. As far as the data that I've seen on Education Week, they've published a whole data set on a bunch of school districts, and it looks like, as far as the top 100 school districts, as far as the biggest school districts, 73% aren't providing any type of in-person instruction to families. And so I thought it was interesting that your bill made the funding contingent upon that. Is this kind of was this kind of the main reason for the bill in the first place, that the schools just weren't reopening and families are kind of scrambling right now, and
absolutely,
they just need alternatives?
Absolutely, Corey. And one point of clarification is the bill would provide funding if in-person instruction is not provided on a regular schedule. So those who may be going in for a couple of days a week, the fact that you're getting some minor amount of in-person instruction does not disqualify you from funding this bill. And that's exactly it, Corey. As I made reference to earlier, if parents choose for their children to participate in the over-the-computer learning, and they believe that's sufficient for their children, then they can make that choice. But it gives people, particularly people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it, an opportunity out, an alternative that they can take advantage of. And here's something else I think is an interesting facet, Corey. It's fairly generous. It has a sliding scale, and it would provide, so if you're starting off at family poor, earning less than $47,600, there'd be 100% of what they call the LEA equivalent. So all the state, local, federal funding amount for that student in that school system would be available to that family as a grant. And then, as I said, there's a sliding scale. It drops as your income level goes up. But as the bill is drafted, you would still get 80% of that. Your family would for the use of that student, even up to an income of about $95,000. So again, the aim is not to take people who are the most affluent in America and provide this because they can take care of their own needs, but those who cannot, or for whom it would be a dramatic burden on the family budget, would have this alternative. And Corey, if I could just mention one other thing. Before being elected to Congress last year in a special election in the 9th District of North Carolina, which I represent, I was in the General Assembly here as a state senator and before that a state House member. And we enacted the Opportunity Scholarship Act in North Carolina that provided similar on a regular ongoing basis, not related to COVID, but scholarships for families who were in need. And as we've gone into that program, we have added funding and raised the income level to qualify. And it's a program I'm very proud of, and it's done very well in North Carolina. And to me, I think of this as a continuation of that effort and one that is tailored to the specific need that we see today.
Hey, Dan. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
The Opportunity Scholarship Governor Cooper just signed a bill that expanded it, right, from 133% of the free or reduced lunch level to 150%. A lot of
That's
people were
correct.
expecting Cooper to veto that particular expansion. Do you have any thoughts as to why it wasn't vetoed? Was it just because it was essentially veto proof, or and also, do you have any kind of thoughts on previous vetoes from Governor Cooper when it came to expanding school choice?
Well, Roy Cooper has been an unremitting enemy of school choice. He seems to have only one higher priority than that, and that is to expand Medicaid, and that's one. He's blocked budget and so forth over multiple years now over that issue. But there was a lot of speculation that he would veto that bill over that, but it again would have snatched a lot of important relief out of the hands of many North Carolina families who need it. Not the least, folks who are trying to get their kids an education option that works for them, and the amount of funding compared to the public school system is a pittance. And why there would be such antagonism, such eagerness to deprive poor families of this opportunity for their children to have an outlet into a school system that works, or into a schooling opportunity that works. I just cannot understand it. But I was very pleased at the work of the General Assembly in putting it before the governor in a skillful way, and in a package that he politically could not resist. And yet at the same time, they've got, even though the North Carolina Supreme Court has blessed the Opportunity Scholarship Program in North Carolina, they're suing again, trying now. Used to apply or previously brought a facial constitutional challenge, state constitutional challenge to that law, and now they're suing on so-called an as-applied basis, which is kind of a ridiculous idea. But it's just you see a grandmother of a child who receives those things interviewed, and it's just heartbreaking that somebody would be trying to litigate to take away that opportunity. I just do not get it, and it is as inconsistent with interest of the people that Governor Cooper serves as anything I can think of. So I guess I've gone off on a tangent, but as you can tell, I'm pretty enthusiastic for this kind of opportunity for people, and I'm grateful for what you do to advance the ball on that.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, what you're saying about the funding level is true. It's only like less than half of what the students would have gotten in the traditional public schools. And that just goes to show you that the private schools are serving their needs better than the traditional public schools at half the cost. If the families are voluntarily leaving the system in large numbers to use this Opportunity Scholarship Program, it shouldn't be funded at half the amount. It should be funded more equally, right? And yeah, it is interesting that there are teachers groups fighting in the courts to get rid of the Opportunity Scholarship Program, when the courts just upheld the program in 2015 as constitutional right in North Carolina.
Yeah, Corey, it is an inexplicable thing, and there really is. I mean, as you say, both for these opportunity scholarships, as well as for charter schools, the way the funding works, it doesn't take away a full amount for a student for if a student moves from that into either one of those other options. So there's no financial reason to oppose it from the perspective of those educational establishment forces that do oppose it, which tells you that they're not opposing it because they're worried about losing money. They're worried about losing monopoly because they don't want to face competition. They don't, and for some reason, they really just oppose the notion that parents ought to have a choice. They think it's in fact, sort of like the story that was out not too long ago from that some professor in one of the Ivy League institutions wanted to ban homeschooling, and they just
Elizabeth Bartlett from Harvard University.
Exactly. Thank you for the reminder. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. The notion.
Oh yeah, I was just pointing out that was Harvard.
Yes, it was a Harvard professor, Bartlett. I remember that now. But the point is that in the academic community, they just don't subscribe to they don't believe parents should have the ability to decide, and it's disheartening. But I think every opportunity that we can take to provide these kinds of opportunities for students, we should do it. And I think this particular bill, my bill, the Choice Act, strikes while the iron is hot. It just takes a situation that no one could argue against, and the most unpolitical people in the world are going to say immediately, that makes total sense. And so we've introduced it. I appreciate your sharing the news about it, and I'm anxious to get co-sponsors and encourage my Democratic colleagues to put it through and make it law.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Congressman Bishop, for giving us your time today. And I'm looking forward to updates on your legislation. And thank you again for supporting school choice and families.
My pleasure. Thank you, Corey, for all your help and all the work that you guys do. And I hope the rain lets up there.
All right. Hope to speak to you soon. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching another episode of the Educational Freedom Institute podcast.